Hey there, this is Mr. Twiggy 1Q1 from Special Game Effects, where each week I'm going to be releasing a new episode where I go through and show you and tutorial you on how to edit a new special effect in terms of video game footage. So you won't really see a lot of live action stuff, though I'm sure if you're an aspiring filmmaker using live action footage, I'm sure you can find a way to kind of integrate it, but for now we're just going to be using games like Halo 3 and Call of Duty. So without further ado, here we go. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you a sort of demonstration of the effect that I'm going to be teaching you how to do today, which is basically green screening with with a sort of white room effect. So here's the demonstration. Alright, that was pretty interesting. Now, the first thing we're going to want to do is import your footage into Adobe After Effects, which is what we're going to be using for today. So, there's two ways you can do this. You can either go ahead and find your folder or go to your desktop where the footage is, and you can click on it and drag it into After Effects on the project window right here. Or, you can even double click on project and find the directory where your footage is and double click on it. Or you can go to File, Import, Import File, go to the same thing, and double click on your footage, and bam, here it is. Alright, now the second thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a composition. Alright, now in order to do this, you can either go up to the top and click Composition, New Composition, and you can choose all the settings. You can choose the width and the height, the frame rate, how long you want it to be. And click OK, or you can go ahead and if you take your footage, you can see that it already has all the details, and you're going to click that and drag it down to the Make New Composition button right there. And you'll see that it automatically creates a new composition with the perfect settings to match your footage, and it makes it the exact length of your footage. Now, let's say obviously 22 minutes is pretty long because I just sort of filmed all of my clips in a row, which I don't really recommend, but that's just really how I do it. But if you have such a long thing, you're going to want to go through and cut it all up. And if you want to make your composition smaller, you can either go up to Composition, Composition Settings, and edit down the duration right here, and click OK. Or you can even grab your workspace where it ran previews, drag it down to however large you want it to be. So if I wanted it to be 4 minutes, I put it right there. Go to Composition, and click Trim Comp to Work Area. And now you just have that 4-minute window, and yeah, it also cuts off your footage at the 4-minute mark, but then you can drag it out and make it longer. So there's a lot of things you can do. Alright, so I've actually already gone through and sort of cut up a lot of these clips. So you're going to want to go to your very first clip, and you're going to go up to Effect, Keying, Keylight 1.2. Now this program is really amazing. It's a lot more useful than most of the other programs, so I really suggest getting it. Just go to Google and type in Keylight, and you'll be able to find this page right here, and just download it. It only has CS3 and CS4 versions, but those work with Adobe After Effects 7 and CS5, and I'd assume pretty much the rest of them, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. So you're going to go back in here, and you're going to take the eyedropper tool, and you're going to click somewhere in your background. You don't want it to be too light, and you don't want it to be too dark. So somewhere right around there. and right away you have a pretty nice green screening effect. You're going to want to go in, and you'll see these kind of sharp green edges around your character. You can solve that by putting the screen pre-blur at around 1.5, and the lower your video quality, normally you'll go higher than that, but for this video quality, it should be fine. So next I'm going to go and I'm going to click Final Result and Screen Matte. And basically what this shows is everything in the white is actually being visible and not keyed out. Everything in the black is being keyed out and is invisible / transparent. And everything in the gray is sort of half and half, and we really don't want any gray, especially in the background. In the background, it's very bad because it shows some of the background, obviously. So we're going to go to Screen Matte, and you can see Clip White and Clip Black. Now, if you bring up the Clip Black, it'll sort of erase that gray from the background. And then if you see on your character, if you see any gray marks, as you can see right there, if you bring down the Clip White, it sort of gets rid of those gray marks, which is really useful. And you can see that around your mask, it's kind of see-through, and you can easily solve that if you just duplicate your footage, put it underneath. Well, first we'll go ahead and we'll set this up to Final Result, and then if we go underneath, we'll delete the key light from this, and then we'll actually take a mask tool on the bottom layer, and we'll put a mask around the mask. Maybe even sort of drag that out a bit. And if we actually just look at the front, we can see that it sort of fills in that mask. It's not really, you're gonna have to animate the mask so that it follows it, but it's not too much work. Alright, so the next thing we're gonna want to do is, if you actually go down to Replace Method, and you set it to Hard, and what that does is it takes all the reflections of the background green on your character and actually sets it to a different color. So let's say you wanted your character to be in like a red room. You can set it to that, and it sort of gives him a red reflection on his goggles, mask and everything. But for now I'm just going to leave it, the Replace Method as source, and I think that's pretty good. Also, if you look around him, you can kind of see the green outline, and to fix that you can go down to Shrink Screen Grow, and if you make it larger it sort of grows out of him. But if you actually set it to a negative number, like -1, it kind of shrinks it in. If I were to go -0.5, actually I'll probably do -1. I think that's pretty good. And you can just really play around with these depending on how it looks with your footage. And yeah, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to New, Solid, make sure it's completely white, and then click Make Comp Size, and OK. And we're going to put that under our footage, and you can rename it by pressing Enter and go to Background, and right away it's a pretty good green screen. I mean, if you look at it right now, but there's a couple things we can do to it. The first thing we're definitely going to do to it is actually brighten him up, because you can see that it's really dark around his chest and you can't really see a lot of detail. So if we go to, make sure you click on your footage, go to Effect, Color Correction, and go down to Curves. And with this you can really brighten it up. And with this I don't really have to worry too much about not going too bright and making it look realistic to the footage, because he's in a white room. And if I turn it on and off, you can really see it really helps the footage. It goes from a really dark, crummy black to a bright, sort of well lit person. And you want to make sure that you kind of keep his color scheme in tone with the background. So if you wanted to put him on the pit, you might make him maybe a little bit yellowish. You know, I don't know. You can also use this if you go down to, if you change the RGB settings and stuff, you can make him yellow and stuff. And this is really useful because you can't really have a lot of yellow Spartans because it's so reflective, or even green Spartans. So you can just take a really nice red Spartan that keys out really well, and then you can actually just edit his colors to make him look green. And let's say, you know, you wanted to have I don't know, like a sort of predator guy. You could even like make him like that, or even if you wanted, you could, you know, you can really just play around with those settings, and you can probably get some really interesting effects. Next, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add a shadow, because you can kind of understand where the ground floor is. It lets you know that there's a light, and it lets you know where it's coming from. So we're going to duplicate the layer, or our Spartan, and we're going to put that underneath, and we're going to name it, we're just going to add shadow in big bold capitals. Make sure the program knows we mean business. And then we're going to go to Effect, Color Correction, Levels. And with levels, we're going to go to this right here, the top part, and we're going to drag it all the way to the right. Alright, and you can't really see it, but it sort of makes this layer black. And that's what we want, because obviously shadows are black. And then we're going to take this and we're going to make sure we set it to a 3D. So we're going to click on this box right here, and we're going to go up to the rotation tool, and we're going to rotate it on the x-axis, and then we're going to we're going to rotate it on the z-axis. You can really place it however you want, depending on where you want your light to be. You kind of just want to line up. Maybe I'll go back a bit. Yeah, right there. You really want to line up his feet. This is a bit awkward. That looks maybe a little bit better. I'm probably gonna rotate him some more. You know, and again, it really doesn't have to be perfect, because, you know, you're not working for Steven Spielberg. You know, it's not going to be amazing, but that looks okay. If you want to get rid of like these sort of black, if you want to get rid of these sort of black edges that came with my footage, you can see it right there. You can really just take the pen tool and add a super quick mask around him, and voila, the black edge is gone. And obviously you have this sort of white around his mask, and it's a little bit too sharp for a shadow. So if we go back up to the key light on the shadow, and we just take the screen blur and we set it up pretty high, you can see that sort of it gets rid of the mask, and it sort of flattens out the edges, and sort of it sort of softens the edges, which which is pretty useful. And if your Spartan is walking around, you can sort of just keyframe the position by pressing P and bringing up the key position. And if you keyframe it right before he moves, and then right after, and you can move him around, and you'll notice that he slides. I don't know how good you can see that. There's some weird colors coming up. I'm not really sure why, but yeah, you can kind of just mess around with that and animate the shadow to follow the Spartans. And again, I can't stress enough, especially with details like this, where you're not really going to be looking at the shadow, but the people sort of, they notice it out of the corner of their eye, and they sort of interpret it, and it just helps provide a really nice feeling for your video, and it looks really professional. So also, after you screen pre-blur it, you might have to move it a bit, because it sort of cuts off his feet, so he looked like it wasn't really connected. But I think that's pretty good. Alright, now what we're going to want to do is, if you look back at the video, you can kind of see half of his body is lighter than the other half, and it's actually pretty easy to do that. So we're going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and we're going to rename that Light Source maybe. You can really name it whatever you'd like. And I'm going to make sure that I set it to, I want to set all of these, so I'm going to control click all of them, and I'm going to set them to their own color, so that you can kind of tell they're all part of a single shot. And I'm going to click on the adjustment layer, and I'm going to select Effect, Color Correction, and then go down to Exposure. And you'll notice that when you bring up the exposure, it sort of lightens the character. And if we're gonna bring it up, you don't want it too high because you don't want the effect to draw attention to itself. You just want it to all kind of work together. And then if, let's say for example, we wanted the light to come from the top right, which it should because the shadow's on the bottom left. So you would draw a mask and sort of go halfway down his body, so that half of his body isn't really lit, but the other half is because it's facing the light source. And if we turn off the masks by clicking that, you can see you have a kind of hard edge, which obviously we don't want. So if we click M three times, and you bring up the feather amount, you'll notice that it feathers out that really sharp edge. And you can kind of see it really provides a good looking effect. And let's say you wanted it so that there's not really a specific light, but it's just the whole room is lit everywhere around, which, you know, that can be good too. You go to the pen tool and you sort of draw a general outline of the Spartan.
Triple kill.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. And you'd click M 3 times, and you would set the mask to subtract, and you'll notice that none of them is colored in, and you would bring the expansion inwards, so it's sort of a couple inches from the edges of his body. And then like before, you see sharp edges, so you feather it out, and you'll notice now it's sort of like, it's not really at his chest, but it sort of lights all of them on the edges, and I think that can look pretty nice too. Alright, so now we have these two clips, and what this does is I've sort of added it sort of moves over the shoulder of this Spartan, and it sort of reveals another Spartan off in the distance behind him. And I sort of added an artificial depth of field, excuse me, and you can see it right here. Alright, the way to do that is actually pretty simple. The first thing you're going to want to do is obviously key out these two clips. What I have this first shot that just moves over his shoulder, and then we have this second shot underneath that just sort of has the Spartan looking around away from the camera. And we're going to go back into the first keying we did and select the layer, and we're going to select the key light and then control click the curves and copy those, edit, copy. And then we're going to go back to those other layers, and we're going to edit, paste it onto both of those layers. So, edit, paste, and then edit, paste. And right away we kind of have a great keying, and this is really useful because not only does it require a lot less work rather than going in and individually keying everything, this also allows you to have the same kind of color scheme and the same sort of keying, so it looks like it was all filmed in the same place and at the same time. So next what we're going to do is we want to build the basic animation where it moves over the shoulder and reveals the Spartan. And you can kind of see these black borders, mainly just on the top. So again, we're going to want to mask it out. You're going to want to go close because soon we're going to be doing some color correction on them. So we're just going to go like that, and now the black is gone. And next, if you look at him, you can actually see like he's really hard to tell. He's really white. His legs blend in and his head blends in. And the reason is because originally he was yellow. And yellow, obviously, it reflects a lot of the green, and he's got a really greenish sort of tint. So that was sort of a bad decision and a bad sort of keying. But I found a way to solve this. So if you go to Effect, Color Correction, and Curves, and then we're going to make sure we minimize the key light and the original curves. We're going to take this new curves and put it above the key light, open it up, and then we're going to kind of bring it down. And obviously if you bring it too far down, it sort of reveals the background. But we want to bring it far enough down so that you can see him a lot more, but you also want it so that it doesn't actually show the background. So right around there, and if you actually look at the before and after, You can see the after's a lot better. And now he's sort of pinkish rather than his original yellow. So that's really useful. So now that we have this, we're going to size them down by clicking on the corner and holding shift and dragging inward. And with the green, with this white room effect, the smaller they are, typically that's the farther away they are. So if we want them really far away, we make them smaller. So I think there's pretty good. We want him to be, actually I might make him a bit bigger. Also, when you're working with small people and layers, it's best just to turn off masks by clicking this button right here. And if you look now, it sort of reveals him as he goes over the shoulder. You want to make sure that he doesn't go behind the mask at any time, because like I said, I didn't solve for the mask, I didn't mask over it. So you'll be able to see him through the mask, which is a bit odd. So now you just have this basic sort of over the shoulder kind of reveal this person behind him. Right, now that we have this animation, or this basic video, we're going to add that artificial depth of field where you have the Spartan that's sort of blurred out, and it sort of switches so that the Spartan is clear, and it switches so that the Spartan's blurred out, and the Spartan in the back, which was blurred, is sharpened. So your eyes kind of focus from the Spartan over to the guy back here. And it's actually pretty simple. First you're going to want to go a couple seconds after the animation to wherever you want to do the switch, and you're going to go on your Spartan, your like red Spartan, and you're going to go to first you're going to want to shut down those effects right there. You're going to go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, and Lens Blur. And what this does is the higher your iris radius here is, the more he is blurred out. Now I think we only really need, I think 20 is pretty good. It's enough so that it's not super obvious that he's blurred out, but it's enough to kind of draw your attention away from him. And that's pretty useful. So first we're going to want to set it to 0 and hit a keyframe. And then if we hit U on the keyboard, it sort of brings up this keyframe so we can see it on the timeline. And if we go forward a bit to however long we want it to take, and then we set it to 25, then we have these two keyframes that sort of transitions from clear to blurry. And if we hold and click and drag over them, and then hit either F9 or right click, keyframe assistant, and easy ease, it makes it so instead of being sharp and just stop and start, it sort of eases in and out of it, so it's a bit smoother. And then if we actually go down here and and then we go onto the bottom with the Spartan, and we actually go to Effect, Blur Sharpen, and Lens Blur, and we do pretty much the same thing but reverted. So I'm going to zoom in a bit here so we can get a bit closer to the keyframes. And then we're going to set a keyframe on the iris radius at 25, and then we're going to go over here and we're going to set it down to 0. And if we hit U, we can see those keyframes, and then we can set them to easy ease. So now if you look at the before, this is the one in the background is sort of blurred out, and the one in the front is clear. And if we go to after, it sort of switches. Now he's not blurred out and he is. So your attention sort of goes from the clear object and switches to the the newly clear object in the background. So that's pretty much how you create it. You can mess around with the settings if you want. Maybe you can make it slower, faster, maybe not as much blur, maybe more blur. You just want to be careful with blur, especially if they're at the edges, because if you look at the Spartan right here, if I were to come here and set the iris radius a lot higher, you can see on the edges it sort of whitens out. So it's not really, obviously it's noticeable right here, but if you wanted to fix that, you can drag them closer to the corner so it's covering that. But even if you look, it's actually doing that a bit right there, but you really don't notice because it's really subtle, and and it's even better because you're blurring him. Your focus is specifically here and not there, so it kind of works together. Alright, now that we're done with that, we're sort of moving on to, I wouldn't say the hardest, part, but maybe the most tedious and definitely the hardest to render, and it's this part right here. Alright, so the way I sort of achieved that effect where it sort of zooms out and you see all those Spartans around him, and then it sort of like fades into the white that sort of like climbs, I wouldn't say climbs, it sort of grows around all the characters, is I basically just took a bunch of shots of right above these Spartans, just, you know, doing a whole bunch of stuff, and I sort of just edited them and stuff like that. So I'm going to take these shots and I'm going to go back, like I said before, and I'm going to copy the curves and key light of the other clips, and I'm just going to go through. I'm going to click, hold shift, and then click the bottom. I'm going to paste those all on there. Now with this, I'm going to go in, I'm going to solo just this layer right here, make sure it's under my cursor, and then I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to mask around him because I have a bit of the tree base and some other stuff in there. Now, I think the curve is maybe a bit too bright. I think that's okay. And then I'm probably just gonna go in and quickly do that to all the layers. Alright, now we have all these different layers of Spartans. I'll just go ahead and spread them out a bit. Also, I'm just gonna turn off masks. Like I said before, it's a lot more useful. And in order to do this effect, really all you have to do is just it's all about duplicating these Spartans and sort of making them look like they're different. So you can do this a couple of ways. The shot of the Spartans are actually longer than I cut them. So what you can do is, well, the very first thing you're going to do is we're going to select all of these. We're going to go to the very beginning, like even before that, and we're going to set a keyframe on their scale. Or first we're going to probably make them smaller, so they're right around there. And then at the end, we want them to be pretty small. So now they sort of go from big to smaller, which adds a cool effect. It's kind of like the camera is zooming out of them, and that's pretty cool in of itself. And then if you just want to make more people, you just duplicate something, move it. You can just rotate it so it's either looking away or looking forward or whatever, and then you can actually offset it. So you move this over and make it longer. So now he's doing the same stuff as that, but at a different time, so it looks like they're doing different things. So you can just go ahead and do that for all of them, and it's not too hard. Just play around with it. Also, if you want to cut off a clip, so at the very beginning, you want to make sure the clip is selected and hold Alt and hit left bracket, not the one on the 9, but the one to the right of the P, and it'll cut it off early. And then if you go to the end, you can do the same thing, but you click the right bracket and it sort of cuts it. Alright, now I've kind of I've gone through and I've added a bunch of them. I've timed them out differently, so they're doing different things at different times, and I've kind of made some smaller and some bigger, and they're looking around, so they all look somewhat unique. And you'll see that they grow a bit smaller. And obviously this takes a lot longer to render than a single image because you're loading, you know, 15 or 16 different images at a time. So but what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave 3 of them on. I'm going to turn off the eyes on all the other ones. And you can do this by just clicking on one and dragging upwards or downwards, and that'll sort of deselect them all. And this way you can kind of see how it works with these ones, but it doesn't take as long to render, obviously, 16 different images. So we're going to go on the top and we're going to go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. And we'll name this Exposure Ending, maybe. And it's actually fairly easy. we're just gonna select effect, make sure it's selected, effect, color correction, exposure, and you'll notice that like if we turn it up really high, it sort of swallows them into this white, and that's basically what it is. We're just gonna keyframe the exposure and the offset, and then we're gonna go forward to however long we want it to take to completely swallow them. Maybe put up the offset a bit, and then basically just pump up the exposure until all these Spartans are completely gone. And then you can just, if you want, you can go layer, new, solid, and then make it black. Make sure it's comp size, and then make it like, you can call it outro. And we hit Alt left bracket, or you can even just slide it down and hold Shift so it clicks in place. Then what we'll do is we'll actually hit T, go to the opacity, keyframe it at 0, move over a bit, and set the keyframe or the opacity up to 100. So it kind of goes into this white, and then it fades into black. It's maybe not the best way, but it is a way. So if we turn on all these Spartans now, and we look, that's before, and this is sort of as they're being taken over, and then this is when it's kind of almost finished, and then it's done. So, you know, it's going to take a while to render, and it's not perfect, but it's good for what it does, and I think it does a good job. Alright, well, that was the first tutorial of special game effects. I hope you liked it, and if you really want to see more, make sure, you know, you can private message me or message me on Xbox Live. My gamer tag is Mr. Twiggy 1Q1, no spaces. You can post a comment, really useful, and you can go on the forums. You can do pretty much anything. And yeah, if you want to see more, if you have any suggestions, definitely let me know. This was my first tutorial. I don't know, it was probably pretty obvious. I was a bit disorganized, but hopefully you guys were able to understand, and hopefully you learned something. So have a good day.